Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're the podcast where we really get into the heart of important sources, trying to pull out the insights that matter.
That's right. And today we've got a book that it definitely does more than just inform. It sort of pushes you, challenges you to think harder about power, justice, and, well, history itself.
Exactly. We're taking a deep dive into On Palestine. It's this really powerful collaboration between Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé.
Two very significant, sometimes controversial thinkers.
Definitely. And this book, it's not just, a straightforward political thing or a history lesson. It goes deeper. It's really an exploration of human rights, the tough realities of a conflict that shapes so much of our world.
It's got real weight.
So our mission for you today is pretty clear. We want to unpack the most important arguments, the perspectives that really challenge you from these two major thinkers.
Yeah, give you a direct line into understanding what they're actually arguing in this work.
And just a quick note before we really jump in, our aim here is to accurately lay out the insights and the perspectives from the book On Palestine.
Right. We're here to help you understand Chomsky and Pappé's viewpoints as presented in the text.
So we're not endorsing them, just trying to give you a clear, impartial look at what's inside this significant work. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with the authors,
Yeah.
the minds behind the book. We've got Noam Chomsky. I mean, many people know him. Huge figure, right? Linguist, philosopher,
Yeah, foundational stuff in linguistics.
but maybe even better known as this long-standing, often pretty sharp critic of U.S. foreign policy.
Oh, absolutely. For decades.
Yeah, for decades. He spent his career sort of dissecting power structures, looking at how governments use propaganda.
How language shapes perception.
Exactly. He always pushes you to question the official story, look under the surface, especially in international relations.
And then you've got Ilan Pappé. He brings a different but complementary perspective. He's an Israeli historian.
And quite controversial, right?
Right.
Especially for his work on the Nakba.
Yes, the Nakba, the Arabic word, means catastrophe. It refers to the mass displacement of Palestinians back in 1948. Pappé's work on this directly challenges the sort of mainstream Israeli narrative about how the state was founded.
And that hasn't always been easy for him, professionally or personally, I gather.
No, definitely not. But what's fascinating here is how these two, Chomsky with his American perspective, Pappé with his Israeli one, both, grounded in serious scholarship.
How they come together on Palestine.
Exactly. It creates this really potent dialogue.
It's a powerful mix. They did work together before on Gaza in Crisis.
Right. That was sort of the precursor.
And On Palestine really broadens the lens. They get into the whole Palestinian question, occupation, displacement, the search for peace, which always seems just out of reach.
They really force you to think about what justice could even look like in that context, with the walls, the checkpoints, all of it.
Yeah.
And, what strikes you immediately reading it is this isn't some dry academic exercise.
No, not at all.
It's got this rigorous analysis, sure, but there's also this real, moral urgency to it. They don't just talk theory.
They bring it down to the ground level.
Exactly. The daily life for Palestinians under occupation. They give examples like restricted movement, how checkpoints and permits don't just inconvenience people, they actually, fragment communities, kill economic activity.
Yeah, stopping people getting to jobs, schools.
Or even seeing family just a few miles away. And things like home demolitions, they show how these aren't just random acts, but part of a system of control.
Leaving families homeless, often with no real recourse.
It's a picture of life fundamentally shaped by military control, day in, day out. And then they connect this, importantly, to a bigger picture.
Right, they draw parallels.
Yeah, comparisons to other historical struggles, against colonialism, against apartheid. They argue these aren't unique phenomena, but fit into recognizable patterns of power.
Okay, so let's dive into Chomsky's specific angle here. As you expect, a big part of his analysis zooms in on the role of the United States.
Classic Chomsky territory.
Right. He basically argues quite forcefully that American support, military aid, diplomatic protection in places like the UN, and how the U.S. media frames everything has been fundamental in allowing the occupation to continue.
He doesn't just assert it, though. He details it. Specific policy choices, vetoes at the Security Council, patterns in media coverage.
Yeah, showing how it creates this environment where the occupation can just persist without major international pushback.
And then, building on that, he gets into the language, how words themselves are used or manipulated.
Another classic Chomsky theme.
Totally. He looks at terms we hear all the time, like peace process or security, and he argues these terms often serve to, mask a much harsher reality. They sound positive, constructive maybe.
but actually obscure what's happening.
That's his point, that they can legitimize the power imbalances, normalize things he sees as deep injustices, like security becomes this catch-all justification for policies that restrict Palestinian life.
And the peace process becomes this endless negotiation that never actually tackles the root issues, like occupation or self-determination in his view.
Exactly. He sees this manipulation of language, of the narrative, as absolutely crucial for powerful states everywhere to maintain control and keep a status quo that serves their interests.
So for Chomsky, Palestine isn't just about Palestine. It's a kind of lens,
Yeah.
right? A case study.
Precisely. A really clear example of how powerful nations manage discourse, control information to keep their position, wherever that might be in the world. It's a broader point about state power.
Okay, that's Chomsky's lens. Let's shift now to Ilan Pappé. His contribution comes much more from the historical angle.
Yes, he anchors a lot of the book in the past, specifically the Nakba in 1948.
Right, you mentioned the catastrophe, where over 700,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes, became refugees. Pappé really digs into the historical record of that.
He does. And what's really central to Pape's argument is his claim that you just cannot understand the conflict today without confronting that history head on.
And his interpretation is quite stark, isn't it?
It is. His core argument, based on his historical research, is that the Nakba wasn't just some unfortunate side effect of war.
Not an accident.
No. He argues it was a deliberate, systematic policy. Ethnic cleansing is the term he uses. He presents evidence aiming to show the displacement was planned, a strategy, not just chaos.
That's a profoundly different way of understanding the starting point of the conflict for many.
Absolutely. And because of that, Pape really hammers home the importance of memory, historical memory. He argues that refusing to forget what happened in 48 and what he sees as continuing in different forms today,
Is crucial.
it's an act of justice in itself, he suggests. Because forgetting, or allowing others to forget, is like the first step towards denying the injustice or letting it be repeated.
So for Pappé, any real path forward, any solution has to start right there, with acknowledging that history, that responsibility,
That's the absolute starting point for him. No ambiguity.
which then leads to the question, for both of them really, what about the present? What about solutions now?
Well, this is where they come together again, quite strongly. They essentially dismantle, or try to, the illusions around the conflict resolution efforts we've seen.
Like the peace process itself.
Exactly. Their combined argument is pretty blunt, that the whole process, traditionally focused on negotiation between Israelis and Palestinians.
Hasn't really been about achieving genuine peace.
Less about peace, they argue, and more about managing the occupation, maybe even solidifying it. A way for Israel, in their analysis, to maintain control, expand settlements, while projecting an image of seeking peace.
And what about the cornerstone of most international efforts, the two-state solution?
They're deeply critical of that, too. Their view is that, while it's been talked about endlessly,
Decades of talk.
right, it's rarely, if ever, been pursued genuinely by those with the power to make it happen. They point to things like the constant expansion of settlements in the West Bank.
Making a viable Palestinian state physically impossible.
That's their argument, that the facts on the ground created over years have basically killed the feasibility of two viable separate states. The premise itself has been undermined.
So if they see those models as failed or maybe even cynical, what do they suggest instead?
Well, they don't offer a simple blueprint, but they strongly push for imagining alternatives, thinking outside the box that's dominated the discussion for so long.
Like what, for example?
For instance, they suggest seriously considering ideas like one democratic state, a single state where Israelis and Palestinians would live together, but crucially, with genuinely equal rights for everyone.
That's a huge shift from the two-state paradigm.
Massive. They also challenge us to think beyond what they explicitly call apartheid-like conditions.
Use that term.
They do. To describe the system of segregation, discrimination, and unequal rights, they document Palestinians facing under occupation. They draw those parallels to historical systems of control over one population by another.
Okay, so they're pushing for new ways of thinking.
Right. And it's important to get their intention here for you listening. They're not necessarily saying this is the answer.
Not prescribing one solution.
No, it seems more like they want to force an honest reckoning with the reality as they see it, and from there, to open up the discussion. To make it okay to critically consider a much wider range of possibilities for what a just future could look like.
To break the deadlock in thinking,
Yeah,
perhaps.
exactly. Challenge the assumptions that keep leading back to the same, in their view, failed approaches. They want you to really grapple with what equality and justice would mean there.
And, while the book is titled On Palestine, it feels like the issues they raise ripple outwards, don't they?
Oh, definitely. It raises these big universal questions that go way beyond the Middle East.
Like it.
Well, fundamental things like how do people resist when they're up against powerful states? What does that resistance look like? What are its costs?
And the role of propaganda, information.
Yes. How does propaganda shape what the world pays attention to? And maybe more crucially, what it ignores? How does that influence empathy, policy, action?
And solidarity. What does real solidarity mean in practice? How does it work?
Yeah, and they make these connections explicit. They link the Palestinian struggle to other movements around the globe.
You mentioned South Africa earlier.
Right. They often cite the anti-apartheid movement there as a key example, showing how international pressure and solidarity eventually helped dismantle that system.
Any other examples?
They also connect it to indigenous rights movements worldwide, highlighting shared themes: displacement, the fight against cultural erasure, the struggle for self-determination against, colonial or settler colonial forces.
So the argument is that the principles at stake aren't unique to Palestine.
Exactly. They're universal principles of justice, rights, equality. And that demands a kind of global moral attention, not just seeing it as a localized, intractable conflict.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, what are the core lessons, the main things you, the listener, can really take away from on Palestine?
I think there are maybe three big ones that stand out.
Go for it.
First, just the absolute importance of critical thinking, like really questioning official stories, questioning the language used, looking at who benefits from a certain narrative.
Don't just accept things at face value.
Right. Second, the necessity of historical memory, Pape's point again. Forgetting is dangerous. It allows denial, allows injustice to continue. Remembering is vital.
Yeah, third.
Maybe the idea of a shared moral responsibility, that we all have some obligation to stand against injustice wherever we see it, even when it's politically difficult or uncomfortable.
Those are powerful takeaways.
Yeah, and look, Chomsky and Pape, they don't pretend to have easy answers here. It's an incredibly complex situation.
No magic wand.
Definitely not. But what they do give you are tools. Tools for thinking, knowledge, yes, from their research, clarity in how they break down complex arguments, and a really strong moral framework to engage with this conflict, and honestly, many others too.
So bottom line, what does this all mean for us engaging with this book?
Well, On Palestine is sharp. It's direct. It doesn't pull punches.
It can be uncomfortable reading.
It absolutely can be, because it confronts you with some very hard truths, or at least their interpretation of them. But that's exactly why it's important.
It forces you to look at power, at history, at the choices we make right now.
Yeah. I'd say this book is pretty essential if you care about justice, about human rights, or even just about understanding the complexities of the world we're in.
It's not a passive read.
No, it really asks you to engage, to try and see past the spin, the propaganda, and to really consider the voices that, as they argue, are often deliberately silenced. It's a call for engagement, intellectually and morally.
It definitely leaves you thinking.
Mm.
Books like On Palestine, they really underscore that history isn't neutral territory, and neither is silence.
All right. Well, that's a great way to put it.
So maybe the final thought for you is this. Engaging with difficult truths like the ones presented here, it isn't just about gathering information. It's also about deciding, consciously or unconsciously, where you stand in this big, ongoing global conversation about justice and human dignity, something to really chew on.